If I asked you to meet someone today, not using a dating app and not through your friends, just naturally pull up somewhere and work your riz, where would you even go? There was a time where that question had an obvious answer. We didn't have apps, so we pulled up to pubs, community clubs, and churches. Relationships didn't need a killer bio, it just needed a repeated presence. But over the last few decades, those places have been vanishing, and the consequences for relationship building are bigger than we realize. So let's talk about it. I'm Sam, and this is The Connection Room. In the 1980s, American sociologist Ray Oldenburg introduced a concept called the third place. He claimed that every society needed three environments: home, work, and the third place. A social space outside of home and work life that acted as a neutral ground where anyone could enter. Historically, this would be places like a barbershop, back when haircuts cost £12. Now, I'm not gonna go off on a tangent, even though I really want to, but let me know how much you pay for your haircut in the comments. I'm really trying to see something. But in addition to barbershops, places like community clubs and local parks qualified as third places. These places were special because you saw people on a regular basis. In my late teens, my friendship group didn't grow because we were networking. It grew because me and my brother took a football to a local park. One day you're trying to pull off crush turns against strangers, and 2 weeks later you're playing Pro Evo in somebody's living room, calling their mum auntie. Because there were so many third spaces, our capacity to discover relationships was greater. Psychologists call this mere exposure. It states that we develop a preference for things and people that we are familiar with. Historically, that's all we needed for a relationship to happen, both platonic and romantic. But over the last 40 years, we've been dealing with the third place vacuum. Local pubs are closing down, community centers have lost funding, and church attendance has declined over the past several decades. To add to this, we work longer hours, we commute further, and spend more of our free time on our own. This inevitably means less spaces for us to hang out together and less places for that spark to happen. When our social spaces started to disappear, it didn't stop people's hunger for connection, so the market filled the vacuum. Dating apps essentially became a digital third place. And while the function looks similar, the psychology is completely different. Instead of familiarity being the starting point of a relationship, it instead becomes about instant evaluation. This turns our attraction from one that starts with bond building into something that's closer to shopping. And that totally shifts the way that we engage with one another. When you're swiping on an app, you don't get that quiet familiarity of a place you've been returning to for months. The woman who always sits by the window reading self-help books. The barista who you now know as Edward, who grew up in Shoreditch. And then one day you notice her. You've seen her 4 or 5 times before, but today, maybe it's the way that the afternoon light catches her hair. Maybe it's the way she always smiles and addresses Edward by name. Whatever it is, it forces you to see her in a different light. And so you walk over and you say, "Excuse me." And everything starts from there. Now, you get a photo and a few sentences. Huge holes get punched out of initial contact. In our third spaces, attraction had the space to develop over weeks, maybe months, but now we have the ability to reject in seconds. Too short, too broke looking, too normal. Swipe. Third places didn't just help people meet. The third place gave people the chance to reveal themselves in real time. You didn't have to be a brand. People just observed how you carried yourself and how you spoke to others. You didn't go to these places with the intention of finding a partner. You were there for coffee or music, which meant if you did stumble into conversation, it was organic. Shared spaces gave people room to develop social identities. If you were good at solving problems, you became the problem solver. If you always gave up your seat to elderly people, or you were good with children, people saw that. And that was everything. Because human interaction is deeply tied into what psychologists call competence signals. We are constantly asking questions such as, can this person contribute something valuable to our group? Do others enjoy being around them, and why? Third places allowed those signals to emerge naturally. Someone might notice your appearance, but what grabbed their attention was how you conducted yourself in that space. Attraction then was rooted in your competence and character. You can't photograph being honorable, and steadiness is harder to caption. Those things have to be experienced in real life. the erosion of the third place hasn't just affected dating, it's affected social trust too. These environments brought together different careers, different ages, and different viewpoints. Political scientist Robert Putnam, in his book Bowling Alone, explored the decline of social capital and increased disconnection amongst Americans in the late 20th century. As real social networks decreased, social isolation increased. Trust in our neighbors declined, and just look around at the social landscape today. We are bitterly divided and more socially fragmented than ever. And now I'm in my feelings because the third place wasn't just the backdrop for romantic adventure. It was where we formed real community, where young men and young women learnt from elders and elders were visible and respected by the younger generation. And when those places faded away, people didn't stop just looking for connection. They started to look online. So something that was supposed to supplement real life community became our starting point. At this point, you might be thinking, yes, it's sad we're losing these places, but what am I supposed to do about that? And it's true. None of us control community planning ordinance or whether community centres get funded. But it's not just that third places are disappearing. It's also that we've stopped participating in them. We go to the gym, put our headphones on, dip out. We sit in a cafe with our heads buried in our laptops like we're working for MI5. We move through the third space that still exists like ghosts. We're there physically, but socially we're invisible. Remember when I mentioned mere exposure? Attraction and friendship often began with nothing more than recognition. It can be as simple as saying, sorry, but I always see you reading that book. I just had to ask, would you recommend reading it? Whether it's a local gym or local church, become a regular. Take time to learn people's names and say hello to the people that you recognize. Not because you're on the prowl for a new partner, but because you're doing your best to build a social ecosystem. Once familiarity exists, everything else becomes possible. And maybe by showing up and letting your personality and competence bring people together, you can build a space where connection can really happen. So look, a lot of relationships began as two lives brushing together in a shared space. There was no strategy, just an opportunity that presented itself as you stood at the bar waiting for your drinks. And maybe that's what's missing for so many, the accidental way that we used to fall for each other, how a glance turned into a moment that made you both stop, and gradually evolved into you speaking each other's body language. It was all allowed to happen because of a place where people weren't meeting as carefully curated profiles, but as regulars in the same room. So maybe the future of modern dating isn't about building better apps. Maybe it's about rebuilding the kind of spaces where connection can happen the old way. But then again, maybe I'm just an unk partaking in a little nostalgia. Whatever the case, my name's Sam, and until the next time, make some room.